Hello and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She is the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is August 30th, 2023. I am Harley Schlanger and I'll be your host. To join the discussion, you can send your questions or comments into us at questions@schillerinstitute.org or post them in the chat room. Well, since our last webcast, the BRICS summit concluded in South Africa, with results which defied the predictions of many in the West that there could be no agreement on expansion. Instead, the BRICS added 6 new members, and now they have a significantly larger GDP than the G7. What, in your view, Helga, was accomplished by this summit, and what are your expectations as to what you might see ahead from the BRICS?
Well, I think this is a breakthrough for all of mankind because, it is the desire of the majority of the countries of the global south to end a system which, began really around 1500 with colonialism and which, kept these countries of the global south in relative underdevelopment, or not relative, in significant underdevelopment, denying them their innate rights to develop like all other human beings and nations on the planet. So I think this is a tremendous, joyful event. And, if the West would just give up their geopolitical viewpoint, they would rejoice because it's actually, the Western countries are riding on the Titanic with a collapsing economy, at least concerning Europe, that's for sure the case, with a threat of a disintegration of the entire transatlantic financial system. And if they would be smart, they would just say it's fantastic that these countries who, already now the BRICS has expanded to be 11 countries, and they represent already now 47% of the world population, and I think more than 1/3 of the buying power of the world. So they would, say these countries are on a trajectory of growth, of moving forward, of education, of their youth. This is a tremendous chance for us to reorganize our ways. But, that probably will require a couple of more shocks because right now it's ridiculous. While, I would advise our viewers, that is you, do not just read what the Washington Post or the New York Times or some other liberal paper is saying about the BRICS. Go to the internet, download the speeches of President Ramaphosa, of President Lula, of Prime Minister Modi, of Xi Jinping, of Foreign Minister Lavrov, of Putin, and read these things as one piece, and you will see that there is a common devotion to overcome the real enemies of mankind: poverty, underdevelopment, hunger. And, there is an incredible optimism because, it was just the day or 2 days before the actual summit took place, India launched its successful lunar mission, being the 4th country on Earth which was able to land softly on the moon, on the South Pole. And there they made tremendous discoveries since. Prime Minister Modi very joyfully said that he will upgrade the Indian space program and turn it into a space exploration consortium of the BRICS, meaning that all the BRICS countries will now participate in a joint mission, to explore space. Now, if you read then what these ridiculous newspapers were writing about, they say, oh, the only reason why the Indians are happy is because the Russian experiment a couple of days ago failed, and the Indians are now happy that they are superior. It's not true. That did not happen. There was an incredible sense of joy of everybody. And, I think the West is just completely freaked out because they do not want to reflect on their ways. I mean, this new combination is extremely powerful. It's optimistic. It offers opportunities to all the countries who are participating. For example, there are now 3 large oil-producing countries which have joined. You have Russia naturally already in the BRICS, but then you have Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, which practically means, that the previous control over the oil price by the US, by the West, is no longer there. And that means a lot because, that takes away the power of imposing unilateral sanctions. So there is a complete change in the power structure. And I think it is that, real freak out, I would call it, which is the reason why they are not able to portray it what it is, namely a tremendous step forward in the history of mankind by, giving for the first time the chance to overcome the underdevelopment of billions of people. And, somebody who thinks normal and not geopolitical or oligarchical or something of that sort would be happy about that. That is progress. That is progress for all of mankind. But as I said, it probably will take a couple of more shocks before people realize that.
Well, Helga, I've received emails expressing enthusiasm for the BRICS summit and also happiness for your role in building support to make changes in the global north, in the US and Europe. One example of that is a question we have from Pat, who asked if you attended the summit, and then he asked, can the new architecture of the BRICS change a nation which is resisting or opposing it?
No, unfortunately, I did not participate in the BRICS meeting because that was a government meeting. But I read the speeches and I looked a lot about the coverage in different countries. So I think I have a fairly good grasp of the dynamic. Well, I think it will, as this is now gaining momentum. There are, I think, 12 more countries, maybe even more, who already have applied formally. There are more than 40 more in addition to that who already have expressed great interest to join. And the various spokesmen of the BRICS have said that there will be a second wave and a third wave of application registration or making candidates members. So I expect this, in maybe a year or so, 2 years at most, to become really the most. It's already now becoming it, but it will consolidate as the most important, most powerful economic group of nations. And they have clearly said that they are open for everybody. They have not said that they are against the West. It's just not true. There was ridiculous headlines in some media saying this is the biggest threat to NATO, but that's not true. Don't believe it. These countries have never said that they want to make war against the North. And, in a certain sense, you have to check your assumptions, because all these countries want to do is they want to, eliminate a system which did not allow them to use their own resources for their own development. And now, basically, they insist that they should have the right to process their own materials, to, increase the productivity of what they are doing, and that there will be provided credit lines which allows them to do the kinds of investments to make this possible. So anybody who is, right, has the right thinking or thinks like a human being should be happy. It's nothing to be worried about, unless, it's like these things, when you shout in the woods, you get an echo back. So if you shout enemy, 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 you have a chance that you eventually turn people and countries into enemies. But if you reach out and say, let's cooperate for the benefit of all of us, then you get that result. So I can only say that, I think the countries who will be negative, they will find themselves sidelined. And, I think the majority of the world will move in this direction. That's my absolute belief.
There was a report today that the United Arab Emirates will inject capital into the BRICS New Development Bank. And we have a question. How significant is this announcement, and will this open the doorway for other nations to invest?
Absolutely. I think the different sovereign wealth funds, especially of the Gulf states, which have tremendous reserves, will definitely boost the ability of the new development bank to become what President Lula had said a couple of months ago when it was opened, or not opened, but when it was upgraded in Shanghai, that the new development bank will become the great bank of the global south. And this makes me in particular very happy because, I feel that my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, had a really extremely important role in, getting the ideas produced first and then circulated to eventually lead to such a result. Because in 1975, he had proposed already, coming back from a trip to Iraq at celebrations of the Ba'ath Party, where he had met many third world leaders and discussing the problems there. He had come back and made an absolutely breakthrough revolutionary proposal to replace the IMF with an international development bank. Now that was absolutely, a really earth-shaking idea because, to dare to challenge the conditionalities of the IMF, which was the mechanism which prevented developing countries from, having access to credit without conditions, forcing them to pay debt first before they invest in social systems and, keeping them back in general. So what this IDB proposal was the idea that at that time, I think it was every year, there should be a credit creation of $400 billion for technology transfer to the developing countries going into well-defined projects. And, that idea we circulated one full year to the non-aligned movement at the time, and they adopted in their final resolution in 1976 in Colombo, practically that idea of the IDB calling for a just new world economic order. And, if you now read the IDB text, it is still the best and most clearest economic scientific description of how such a bank should function. And, you can actually see that, the ideas are actually becoming a reality. For example, China and Iran just made a deal whereby China is helping Iran to enlarge their Khomeini airport for the worth of $2.5 billion. And Iran is paying with oil for $2.5 billion. So what normally would appear in the statistics as a 5 billion trade volume now appears with zero because, it's 2.5 versus 2.5, so it balances out. So in an interview, the former Undersecretary of State of the Economic Ministry of Italy, Michele Geraci, was asked, does that mean that Iran and China are going back to barter deals? And he gave the very obvious answer saying no, but this gives you a pre-taste of how the new currency will function, basically without that we will have trade without currencies, but basically a new currency a unit of account will be established, which will facilitate such trade through a clearinghouse, and then it will be expanded. So I think this is exactly what Lyndon LaRouche had proposed with the IDB, with another paper called Trade Without Currency. And I would say that everybody who wants to know how this new mechanism will function, you should basically go to our websites and get a copy of these documents and study them, because that is actually what is being the basis for what these countries are implementing right now.
And there are emails coming in of people asking what they can do to support this. One of the things they can do is register for our conference on September 9th. The Schiller Institute will have a conference. Join hands with the global majority to create a new chapter in world history. It's on the schillerinstitute.com website, and there'll be more coming out on that. I mean, we're getting interesting questions. Josh writes, how does a guy from Minnesota get a new development bank bond without investing in Wall Street or the City of London? Well, you'll have to stay tuned for that one, because I'm not sure that they're selling bonds to the average investor yet. But Helga, I want to move on to another aspect of the strategic situation. There are numerous sources, including the Wall Street Journal, that say that Biden and the NATO allies intend to keep providing weapons to Ukraine, military assistance and money to Ukraine, well into next year. David Ignatius, who's often a CIA leaker for the Washington Post, said that strategic patience is the best weapon against Putin. And so the question is, what could change this stance in the West? Are there prospects for new peace initiatives?
Well, I think that the idea of keeping this war going is the most cynical perspective you can imagine, because it all happens on the back of the Ukrainian people. I mean, look, the casualties are enormous on both sides, but I think on the Ukrainian side they're much higher. The Ukrainian people are being destroyed, the economy is destroyed, so it's just a total catastrophe. And there was just now a warning of several very prestigious high-ranking people from Germany, warning, saying that the World War I was afterwards regarded as the great tragedy of the 20th century. And we should absolutely make sure that the Ukraine war is not becoming the great tragedy of the 21st century, because it does have the potential to lead to a nuclear war. And I think that is very much prescient, conscious in the minds of many people. So there are many more efforts to go for a peace negotiation. The Africans play a very important role. It was again discussed in the context of the BRICS summit, the summit between President Xi Jinping and the Africans immediately afterwards. Then the initiative of Pope Francis is still very much an issue. Also, the Hungarian president was just in Rome, in Kiev. I mean, there are many people still trying to find a solution to this whole question, but I think it does require more people in the so-called, global north to wake up to the dangers. I think, you find, I think the mood in the populations, I know it in the United States from accounts I have heard, but in Germany, for example, people are really absolutely desperate. You wouldn't know this if you only watch the TV or listen to the newspaper, but look at what happens as a result of the sanctions against Russia, which did not ruin the Russian economy, as our unspeakable foreign minister has been saying. It did not ruin Russia. Russia is doing relatively well, but it ruins Germany. Germany is in a free fall. You have right now, belatedly, finally, some of the great industrial associations are, basically asking the government should intervene and do likewise what the United States government did with the Inflation Reduction Act, subsidizing investments, lowering the energy price, because the energy price is killing German industry. Many are closing down. You have no idea what's going on in Germany. You have bakeries closing down, service shops like barber shops, other services, Mittelstand, middle-level industry closing down or going abroad, investing in the US, being lured by the advantages of the Inflation Reduction Act, or going to China. Many so-called hidden champions who are already invested in China, when they're being asked, are you planning to come back or what do you find? They say, absolutely no, there is no way how we can come back to Germany under these conditions. So you see right now a collapse of the German economy, which is unbelievably, and I think this will come to a breaking point because, the idea that you can keep the war economy going by producing more and more military armament, weapons, while at the same time neglecting the real productive base of the economy, this will go to a breaking point. And I don't know exactly if it will come already this fall. At the end of the fiscal year, you always have a crunch. It may come through unprecedented developments, but I think the West right now, including NATO, including the war machine, is a giant on clay feet. And, I think that the governments who are conducting these policies, they are gambling with the well-being of the people. I think they are not only incompetent, they are not leaders, they are, bunglers for the most part, but they are ruining what generations and generations have built up in the post-war period. And, I think that we have right now in some countries, including in Germany, the worst government in the post-war history, and the population is freaking out, and you will not see this under the carpet for long.
One of the things people can do is circulate your appeal to the citizens of the global north to join hands with the global south. And this is also available on the schillerinstitute.com website. We've gotten tremendous response to it, lots of signatures, but we need more. We need more and more people involved to push these stubborn governments into reality. Now, we have a question from a regular viewer, Menashe, who asks, what are the implications of the current round of coups d'etats in Africa to the development of the BRICS nations? There's just another coup today in Gabon. What are your thoughts on that, Helga?
Well, I think that is an expression of a similar phenomena, like the BRICS countries expanding is fight against colonialism, but these coups in West Africa are basically driven by the same motive of the so-called France Afrique, the former colonial French part of Africa. They don't want, the French are the most hated people in that part of Africa right now. And the Europeans are reacting to that completely ridiculous. There is right now a foreign minister meeting taking place in Spain, and all they are discussing, I don't have the full report yet, but from the initial things you could read, they are discussing to try to encourage ECOWAS for military operations against these governments. I mean, the only thing they could accomplish with that is to put the entire African continent up in flames. But the majority of the populations of these countries are supporting these coups, and therefore, I think the only thing the Europeans can accomplish is to discredit themselves in the eyes of the whole world even more. They are trying to continue the so-called war on terrorism, training police, training military. But we have seen in Afghanistan where that led to, or Iraq, they can sit there for decades building, military things, and then they leave at a certain point, and you see what happened in the meantime. No development occurred whatsoever, not in Afghanistan, not in Iraq. And then you have a blowback, and that blowback comes in the form of a new system forming itself. So it is really time also for people the so-called strategic experts, to reflect on the fact, if they are so smart, when all their objectives constantly fail.
So I have three more questions, Helga, and I'll keep the questions short so we can get them in the normal time. It was announced today that a court in Pakistan has suspended the conviction and prison sentence of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. And so a regular contributor from the United Kingdom asks, will there be a backlash against the United States given the leak that Blinken ordered the removal of Han back in March 2022?
Well, I don't know. All I can say is that the followers of Imran Khan are many. I think Pakistan has a tremendous economic crisis, given the the geographic location of Pakistan. It's the natural part of the Belt and Road Initiative, the new Silk Road. There are tremendous developments going on in the whole Central Asian region. I know that this is still a very contested area, because this is the region where the British had their great game focused. Basically the game to destroy Russia, and more recently also destabilize China. So it's a very tense situation. But I think that if justice prevails, then Imran Khan will be reinstituted, and if there's a new election, I think he has a very good chance of winning that.
Here's a question I think you'll be happy about. From Anthony, he asks, can you talk about Lin's role in the Lopez Portillo attempt at an oil for technology deal that was crushed by Brzezinski? Given that now we have the China-Iran deal you mentioned, what was the proposal that Lin made with Lopez Portillo?
Oh, that was a very, very good thing, because in 1982, when essentially Wall Street banks had organized an incredible capital flight out of Mexico, President Portillo called in Lin and LaRouche, to help him to defend the Mexican economy against such manipulations. And we flew to Mexico at that time, and within 3 weeks, actually faster, Lin wrote what was called Operation Juarez, which was not only a plan for the defense of Mexico, but for the entire Latin American infrastructural integration. So shortly thereafter, on the 1st of September 82, Lopez Portillo implemented that. He made capital controls, he established a national bank, he started to give credit lines. And, at that point, there was a complete furor, terror in Wall Street, in Frankfurt, in other, money places, because they thought that the Latin American banks had formed a debtors cartel, which never was the idea. It was the idea to have an orderly reorganization of the banking system. Now, unfortunately, at that time, Brazil and Argentina did not act in solidarity with Mexico. And therefore, when Portillo left office a couple of months later, the whole effort sort of came to an end. But now you have a revival of that in the form of President Lula from Brazil being a very active member of the BRICS. And at the BRICS meeting, he made it a very strong point for Argentina to be integrated into the BRICS. Mexico at this point, is not asking to be part of the BRICS, but that is for what every Mexican always says, for historical and geographic reasons of the position of Mexico where it is located. So I think this is definitely also an idea which is very much alive in the present configuration.
And Helga, I have a question for you from Marianne, who I think is expressing the natural response given the cover-up in the media and the lies and so on. She asks, so if we go with the BRICS, I assume meaning America, Does that mean as Americans we lose the Constitution and our Bill of Rights?
No, no. To the contrary, you'll regain it because right now I think the Constitution is not exactly very well safe, but it is the principle of the BRICS to absolutely be based on a partnership of sovereign countries. The principle of sovereignty is very, very much the starting point for this whole new system. And also the non-interference into the internal affairs of the other country, the respective country. Now that means that all the things which belong correctly and justified to American history, accomplishments in history, will absolutely remain the sovereign right of the United States. And in a certain sense, the only difference is it will allow that same rights for every other country as well. Actually, the president in American history who had the same kind of idea, very much influenced, by Leibniz, was John Quincy Adams, who, as you know, was ambassador at some point in Europe. He spoke several languages, and he had this very, very distinct idea that cooperation among sovereign nations is the only way how you can have peace. And he's famous of having said that it was not the role of the United States to go out and chase foreign monsters, but to actually form such a partnership of perfectly sovereign republics or nation states. And I think that is the big challenge, what we have to solve, And I really would like you to sign this appeal to the citizens of the North, because the whole world peace, the future of all of humanity, really does not depend on what the BRICS are doing. They are doing what they had intended for a long time. Now they get their act together. They are forming a system which will be beneficial to all of them. But if we can avoid the very present danger of the whole situation going out of control, leading to nuclear war, and don't kid yourself, if it ever comes to the use of nuclear weapons, then that was it. There will be absolutely no chance for humanity to survive it. And it is the nature of the nuclear war that once you use one nuclear weapon, all of them will be used. And then the result will be nuclear winter for 10 or more years, and all life on the planet will be extinct because nobody will have anything to eat anymore, because nothing will grow anymore. And that is the end of the thing, and no historian will be left to even account for it. And that's the danger we face, and that is why we should be really, really mobilized, and you should make a decision that you will become active to, in a period like that, when it's very clearly that we are in a transformation. I keep saying, like once 1,000 years, because the period of colonialism was 600 years, and that is definitely coming to an end. And it will end either with the extinction of all of civilization or a new era of mankind where we all live together, focused on the real enemies of mankind, that is hunger, poverty, underdevelopment, the danger of being destroyed by an asteroid, unconquered diseases. And we should, focus on these things, the common aims of mankind, and work together. I think what Prime Minister Modi said about the BRICS consortium for space collaboration. We should have such consortiums for all the fields, which are the common aims of mankind. And then we could do such miracles, and, we could spend all our time with creativity, with things which make the life of all people better. And I think that is the moment in which we are right now. So I would really appeal to you, become active. Don't sit there on your couch as a potato or whatever, but, make the step to become an activist, to join our various activities, circulate this appeal to the citizens of the North with a signature, collect more signatures, and just get in contact with us, because we really need to put this whole world on a different trajectory, and you are important for that.
Well, thank you, Helga, for joining us again this week. And I'd like to thank all of you who have sent in emails expressing support and interest in this. But as Helga just said, you need to do more than just express support. Join the fight. You'll find the appeal to the citizens of the Global North at schillerinstitute.com, as well as the registration for the September 9th conference. And with that, I'll say goodbye, and we'll see you again next week.
Yes, till next week.